I am a former Assistant Secretary of Commerce, ran NTIA. I am now a consultant and serve on a number of corporate boards. And with that, I will turn to the rest of the panel, let them introduce themselves. Patricia, Neil, Todd, would you like to?
I will start. I'm Patricia Lepiani. I'm the president of the Idea Marketing, and we are a marketing firm dedicated to social causes. Basically, we connect services and do a lot of behavior change campaigns, and we connect those with communities and families, and especially those that need it the most and need those services the most. And the last campaign that we have been working on for the last almost 23 months of our lives, 22 months of our life has been COVID prevention, and then COVID vaccination.
Todd or Neil?
I think we're both terrified that one of us is going to start talking and the other one's going to start talking, and we're going to be talking over top of each other, but I'll go. I'm Neil Chilson. I am the Senior Research Fellow for Technology and Innovation at the Charles Koch Institute. I am a lawyer and a computer scientist, former chief technologist at the Federal Trade Commission. Spent a lot of time doing consumer protection work there, and did a lot of telecom law before that. CKI is proud to be a partner with FOSI, and we're very excited about the event so far today. And I'm really excited to talk about this really important issue during this breakout session. So glad to be here.
And I'm Todd O'Boyle. I'm on the U.S. public policy team at Twitter. We at Twitter are proud to support FOSI and really appreciate the invitation to be a part of today's panel. Look forward to discussing the work we do at Twitter to elevate the public conversation and address issues including disinformation across a number of areas. So with that, thank you.
I thank all four of you for being here. It's a great panel. Facts, Lies, and Reality is a great title. And it's interesting. I noted on my Facebook page today that this is the 9th anniversary of another FOSI panel I did about connecting the world to the internet. And now we have this newer problem of misinformation. So some of us are wondering if we did the right thing in connecting billions of people to the internet, giving the state of facts and lies and reality on the net. So let me ask each of you, how are you thinking about misinformation, and how should we, those of us out here who aren't professionals in the misinformation field, be thinking about it? And what are you doing to research and what kind of research are you doing to combat or to overcome what we're seeing in the market with regard to misinformation? And any one of you can start. We'd like each of you to kind of give us your opening thoughts on this topic. Why don't we go in reverse order? Todd, since you were the last one, why don't we'll work our way back to Patricia.
Sure. Thank you, Larry. Well, at Twitter, we view threats to the conversation online as dynamic and evolving. And so we similarly employ a number of tools to address mis and disinformation and ensure that people have access to reliable sources to to understand what they're reading and have confidence in the conversation they're participating in. Mis and disinformation, we focus on really 3 areas so far: COVID mis and disinformation, civic integrity, in other words, relating to elections or other civic processes like the U.S. Census, and synthetic and manipulated media, which are sometimes referred to as things like deepfakes. So we, believe that it's essential that we talk to experts in the civil society and the public sector to understand both threats to the conversation online and for example, the COVID, with regards to COVID, we want to talk to public health officials and academics, understand what the best information is to help make sure that Twitter users have, again, confidence in the conversation they're participating in online.
So when How do I think about misinformation online? I think of it as a very complicated problem. And let me split it into two parts. Todd mentioned both misinformation and disinformation. And I would say disinformation in some ways is the easier problem to tackle. I don't know from a technical aspect, but from a sort of philosophical perspective and a policy perspective, disinformation is the creation of information with intent to deceive. And that's a standard that I think we can all agree raises a bunch of problems. When people are acting that way online, it's in some ways more clear that those are bad actors and that we should target them because their intent to deceive is usually trying to reach some other policy point that requires deception to get there. So my time at the Federal Trade Commission was spent often dealing with fraud of various kinds. And you can think of disinformation as a form of fraud. Misinformation is harder because misinformation isn't always, people don't intend often to deceive. And in fact, often with misinformation, which are facts or statements that are not factually true, I think we all probably say things that aren't true all the time. And some of those can be even with good intent when somebody asks us how their new haircut is or something like that. And I don't want to minimize the problem, right? The problem online is very serious, but it is a harder one to deal with from the policy perspective because a key part of making progress in the world of ideas is allowing a debate back and forth between ideas. And if the goal is to eliminate, you have to be careful that you don't eliminate conversation with the same tools that you might use to try to eliminate misinformation. Conversation is really important. And it's ultimately the only sustainable way to fight misinformation, I believe. And so that means it's a complicated problem that isn't just a policy problem. It's a cultural problem as well. And it's a problem for each of us as individuals and how we behave online. So the idea that we can automate our way away from it is very difficult. It requires a multi-pronged attack that relies on us as individuals behaving well as much as many of the gatekeepers out there on the internet also finding ways to deal with these challenges. So that's how I think of it, as a complex problem with a likely an emergent and multi-pronged solution.
The good news, though, is that at least with regard to haircuts, two of us have never had anybody talk to us about our haircuts in recent years, I'm pretty sure. Patricia?
As a marketing person, I see it. It is very serious and it's very, very hard to tackle. And the reason is because when you do marketing, you try to have economies of scale. So to have a message that can reach out to the large majority of the people. And the problem is and disinformation created within the social media environment really targets each person, and the information, people see what they want to see and they're used to see. So the problem with that is to be able to counterattack that, you have to go to a very micro level to target people with the same information, to really talk about the same thing and really balance out the same concern, but on the other sense. So for instance, in our case, we know perfectly that mis and disinformation have affected particularly COVID guidance and guidelines, and then especially COVID vaccination rates. So we had to find people in the community having the same life experiences of the majority of the people that had this misinformation challenges, train them and give them information so they can go on their own social media to talk and say the truth. Because at the end of the day, it is very hard to change this by policy. It's very hard to I think Twitter has been doing an amazing job in filtering, but still it is very hard. We're talking about millions and millions of people. So the only way is to have, well, we will have all these people that have this misinformation and are really making an effort to get it out there. So we have to do exactly the same, but with the real information. But it have to be on a one-on-one basis, which makes very, very challenging to do it and very expensive to do it, because you definitely do not really have economies of scale. And that is the real challenge here. It is not easy. It is very time consuming and uses a lot of resources, but that's the only way that we have found that actually we have been able to do something about it.
FOSI concentrates really on our youngest and maybe in some ways our most vulnerable citizens, and the folks who interface with them are our parents, are the parents of those kids and their teachers. So, from your perspective, what can parents or educators do to educate children, students about false information, and especially as rumors or misinformation spread around their social networks or at school? And it's one thing when you're an adult, you have more filters and more ways of gaining access. I think we need, when you're children, you use some guardrails, and those guardrails often are adults, parents, and educators. So what's their role in this? And I'll leave that to any of you who'd like to step in.
Well, one thing I'll share is that Twitter has long supported media literacy efforts, including Digital Inclusion Week and other media literacy initiatives to help train young people on the difference between fact and fiction online. I think Patricia and Neil have both made really good points about how to address at scale challenges that afflict all online platforms. And one thing we've done at Twitter, I think that one thing that makes us unique is our approach to combine both a human review with automated review, so that we can scale more quickly and address more harmful misinformation online. But as Neil says, there's also a role for emergent order and distributed crowdsourced solutions. And to that end, we've been using our Birdwatch pilot to empower individuals to tag information as potentially misleading, or on the other end, tag it as a valid. And while we see that as just one tool in our toolbox to approach a more distributed and sort of ground up approach to getting people reliable information that they can trust, I would also point to our Blue Sky, our work with Blue Sky to arrive at a more distributed and protocols-based approach to content moderation.
Can you talk about Blue Sky a little bit for folks who may not be familiar with it?
Sure. So the idea is that instead of having one central automated one centralized approach to automation at Twitter could be more protocols based. And in the same way that you can use any client to send an email, you can use any browser to view the web, and you can, and different products sort of compete on feature set, and we would empower users to find a different client to use Twitter in a way that would offer additional moderation options. And the hope there is that we could then ultimately arrive at a more decentralized approach.
Patricia, from a parent's perspective, if a parent was looking at this issue and trying to make sure that his or her child wasn't consuming either misinformation or disinformation, what should a good parent do? How should they look at this emerging problem?
So I think I would say the first and one of the main challenges is the speed. Really, the amount of the mis and disinformation and the topics go very fast, get in the market and in the digital environment very fast, and get out also very fast. So the problem with the parents is you need to be on top of those main conversations. So kind of you have to have you cannot tackle everything, you cannot be educated about everything, but then you need to choose, these are the 4 or 5 things that I need to follow to make sure I'm on top of that. And then if I see it, I can talk to my kids about it proactively. So instead of waiting for the kids to see it, is, okay, you know what? you could see this, and this is what happening, and kind of preventing them. So by the moment they see it, they already have a reference from a trusted source of information, who are the parents, and they have enough guidance. So because the real challenge, like in our case, we had to work with 2 mis and disinformation firms. They had to provide weekly reports of everything that is going on, not only in US, but across the world, because we are in a global world. So then we had to develop, and we got information on Fridays, and then we had Saturday and Sunday to develop content to really counterattack this. So Monday, we would be able and be prepared to really go and hit the social media environment, to go and have videos, educational videos, or train our influencers and be ready to go. So it's pretty similar to the situation with the parents. You have to be on top of that. You need to develop content and be very prepared about that. And then also be proactive about going and talking before even those mis and disinformation topics get even bigger.
Just a reminder to the folks who are watching this and listening to us, feel free to send us questions. We'll try to incorporate them into what we're doing, because this shouldn't just be a one-way conversation. We'd love to have your participation as an audience. Neil or Patricia or Todd, do we need to approach this differently for different age cohorts? I mean, do you look at this differently for preteens versus teens versus toddlers versus adults? I mean, as we're looking at this, do we need to kind of divide this into bite-sized chunks and address it differently, or is there a one-size-fits-all solution for these problems?
Well, I'll jump in. I don't think there are one-size-fits-all solutions for complicated problems ever. And I think dealing with children and misinformation is certainly one of those areas in which you want the context is going to, and the issues that are coming up are going to be so specific often to the individual families and the communities that are involved, that you really want to provide tools that they can use. And those tools are going to differ, obviously, depending on the age of the child. The other factor here that's pretty important is that part of raising children who can, as adults, grapple with a flood of information and sift the true from the false is exposing them to that, and that means to that process and to the critical thinking. And in order to do that, that requires a lot of trust between parents, but also it requires experience by the children. And so, in particular, as children get older into the teen years, not only is it pragmatically important to let them practice critical thinking skills with guide rails, it's actually constitutionally much more problematic to restrict them from doing so. And so we have to be careful about the types of policy tools that we might use in this space. Even if the goal is to protect children, some of those older children in particular are protected by the Constitution from maybe some of the more intrusive or one-size-fits-all policy solutions that we might try to use to protect them from harmful content.
So, I'm sorry, Patricia, you're going to say something.
Yeah. So 2 things. One is, obviously the message needs to be different depending on the kid's age. All of us know that. But also when they're old enough, there is this dilemma about they want to know about something. And maybe it's not the best thing, but it's better if they discover that with the help of an adult that cares, of a trusted adult like the parents or someone else, than by themselves. For instance, I have pretty close kid and wanted to learn about the dark internet and the black part of the internet. And that's something that is pretty complex and is a very tough topic. But then the parents decided, well, I will do the research because he will get there no matter what. If I say no, he will get there. So let me walk the kid through this, and then we learn this together and we do it together. So, and that goes for older kids, but also for younger kids. But then the other thing that we need to take in consideration is not only the age of the kids, but also there are other adults that influence kids that maybe are not as prepared to handle and tackle mis and disinformation. For instance, grandparents. So we know boomers are very much struggle with differentiating mis and disinformation from real information in the social media environment. They were adults when all this started, very much adults. So there was never such a thing as a training of, okay, even if this person have 5 million followers, that doesn't mean that what this person is saying is actually true. And there's no one regulating them. So they do not understand that piece. And then you have grandparents that are with kids, can provide mis and disinformation, really not intentionally, but is what happens. So parents have to be very vigilant into not only the social media itself or the digital encounter itself, but also about those trusted adults that are around the kids that could be falling into the mis and disinformation inadvertently.
So you're saying that millennials and Gen X are kind of the sandwich generation. They've got their kids who are susceptible to misinformation, and they've got their parents and aunts and uncles who are susceptible. So I'd never heard that before. That's as a boomer, it's actually interesting to hear that.
Well, and the problem is you're really, as I'm on XY. So my mother doesn't you go like, oh, I really trust this person. They have 5 million followers in YouTube. And it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean that this person is actually saying the truth. And they really struggle with that. And it's the same situation than kids. I mean, it's a matter of the brain situation at that point and also being trained. I mean, like the boomers were not trained on this. Younger kids haven't been trained about what to believe or not. It's actually about a matter of training and understanding this could not be true. This thing about you could be skeptical about it. So it is about a matter of the same thing that Neil is saying. It is about educating yourself and educating the community. Parents haven't been, like grandparents haven't, and kids haven't. So definitely we're on the needle.
So
would you say, Neil, would you agree with that?
I mean, I think education is a challenge across all age contingents. Certainly facilities with sorting misinformation from disinformation from reliable information is something we could all use more practice at. And it comes from doing it, right? I think the challenge today, what is new is that there are so many more sources of information, perhaps than a time when you had 3 broadcast stations and your city newspaper as your primary sources of information. And so it's easier to pick and choose the ones that feel comfortable to what you think already, or the ones that are already made inroads into your community. And so heightening that skepticism, that critical thinking ability, even for sources that seem to be saying something that you like, that's something we all need more practice at, for sure.
So, Todd, I'm going to ask you this question. As the industry representative on the panel, where's the responsibility lie between consumers and tech companies when it comes to staying informed and combating false, misleading, mis or disinformation? What's the balance? Is it, should I just be a responsible consumer and you're a platform, or do the platforms and industry have some responsibilities as well? And how's that shake out?
Well, we absolutely take a responsibility to improve the health of a conversation on our platform. It's really the foundation of everything we do, because if people are finding consistently that they don't trust the conversation that they're seeing online, if they don't find that it's a healthy conversation online, then it'll lose their user base, and people will go to other platforms that are doing a better job.
What about the situation where people do trust what they're saying? It's just wrong, or they do enjoy what they're hearing. It's just wrong, and then they can spread it. So, is it up to us as consumers to be more discerning, or for the industry to kind of ferret out? Well, there's a problem here.
Yeah, and I think that's why what your question cuts to the heart, which is what steps are we taking to improve the quality of the conversation and improve the likelihood that people are going to encounter good and reliable information. And so to that end, as I said, we use human and automated review to enforce the Twitter rules, and we have explicit rules that have evolved on things like civic mis and disinformation and people posting the kind of content that might interfere with free exercise of the franchise and full and fair participation in our elections. And we have rules governing content that you might post about COVID-19. I believe we were one of the first, if not the first, social platforms to publish COVID-19 misinformation rules back in the spring of last year. And so, we take to heart our responsibility to work with civil society and work with academics and make sure that we understand the latest and greatest in terms of what the science is telling us, and also what experts are telling us are the threats to the conversation, and what are some threats that maybe manifest we're seeing bubble up on in other parts of the internet, and we're concerned, maybe they're going to come this way, so we're going to be on watch. So we think that addressing this, Neil, said there's no one. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said there's no one solution or one size fits all. I would say the other side of that coin is that this is an all of society. This demands an all of society response, and that includes all the work that we do night and day to ensure that our platform is, well, as we say, healthy. But it also extends to the work we do with civil society. And going back to news literacy and media literacy, we feel that this in particular is an area where we have great opportunities to partner with organizations like FOSI and Common Sense Media or the National Alliance for Media Literacy, who develop great age-appropriate curricula for internet users of all ages.
So, Neil, it's a split between consumer and corporations. Do we have the right balance? Are the corporations doing what they need to do, the tech companies, and are consumers as actively involved and engaged as they need to be to begin to stem the tide of misinformation or disinformation?
So I think a key thing to think about is to step back a little bit and realize that misinformation and disinformation are part of a process of building knowledge, and that process is never done. So what we all have a responsibility to improve that process and how we participate in it. And the tech companies participate in it in a very visible way, and I think in some ways they've made more legible the variation in knowledge that people have out there, right? So pre-Twitter, there were plenty of people who believed crazy things and would go around telling that to people, maybe just on the street corner, or maybe just over Thanksgiving dinner or something. But you didn't see it in a permanent record that was online that then everybody else could point to and say, like, see how crazy these things are that are out there. And so I think while the social media platforms have sort of exposed some of that about us, they certainly aren't the only source of misinformation. In fact, a lot of our and because of that, the responsibility to work on this problem is broader than just even in the corporate side. It's broader than the tech companies, right? It's the cable news companies as well. It's the news publishers. It's and it comes ultimately, though, the only scalable solution is one that provides tools to people to engage with that process of building knowledge for themselves over time. And there's lots of tools that can be deployed at lots of different levels, but it really is a process that needs all of us to continue to get better at it. We're not going to solve misinformation, but we can get much better at producing useful information that is true and understanding the world better, which is ultimately the goal.
I'm going to remind our audience one more time that we'd love to hear your questions if you have them, so feel free to send them in. And Patricia, I cut you off.
Yeah. So I think Neil is just right in the way that the problem is the microphone. So a lot of people didn't have a microphone before, and they were like the kind of crazy aunt, that was there and was talking to the people. But now she has a large microphone. So to that end, the ways to develop the right information and give people tools, but also giving a larger microphone to those that can actually provide good information within the same environment. Like in our case, we hire about more than 250 influencers with millions of followers, all of them, some of them. And they were able to have a larger microphone about talking about the reality. But then also, and this is to answer address one of the questions from Mike Nelson, and it is the rural environment. So we had to be very mindful about making sure we have representation in each rural community and had select community members and leaders within those rural communities and provide information to them directly so they could, in a very intentional way, try to influence their very own smaller communities. Because the problem is what happened in the urban areas is very different than what happens in the rural areas. And also, the media outlets are owned by different organizations. So a lot of the rural radio, like I said, on some of the newspapers, the local TV stations in some rural communities, they have very different editorial trends. So really we need to go within the heart of the community and give them a larger microphone so they can provide the right information with those smaller communities.
So let's follow that thread a little bit. One of the great inventions, if you're an African American, has been Black Twitter. Some of us in the Black community, Twitter wouldn't exist if it wasn't Black Twitter, because it's one of the most interesting parts of the Twitterverse. But one of the things that we did notice over the course of COVID is that Black and Hispanic communities in particular were targeted or were subjected to more disinformation, misinformation about it, which may have had some impact on lives, on illness, on spread. Do we need to have specific policies to combat mis and disinformation in communities of color, in minority communities? And if we do, what should those policies and practices look like? And I'll leave it for all three of you to answer.
Well, I'll start by saying from the beginning, I want to start by saying that from the beginning of this pandemic, and particularly since vaccines have rolled out, we've made available tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in ad grants to organizations that can speak to specific groups, to specific demographics. And that has included working with great organizations like the Black Alliance Against COVID. We gave them some in-kind ad credit to help them distribute their Black Doctors Reading COVID Tweets series, which if you haven't had a chance to check it out, is very entertaining, but also provides some really important health information. So we've looked at, in consultation with public health experts, where are the biggest problems where are the biggest areas of misunderstanding? Where are the biggest areas of hesitancy or skepticism? And worked with leaders in those communities and given them access to a variety of supports to help them communicate with those individuals. We believe that social proof is essential. That in other words, seeing someone, a neighbor or a friend or a family member, validating, say, the COVID vaccine goes a long way to helping an individual understand that okay, well, yeah, maybe I was on the fence, but it helps them make the decision. We rolled out earlier this year a special emoji for getting vaccinated, #V or hashtag vaccinated with a V emoji, and encourage people to take vaccine selfies. And so then their friends and family and neighbors could see them posting online that they were getting it. And we think that there's good evidence that helps bring home the message for a lot of folks, really across geographies and across demographics, that once you see someone like yourself taking the step, it doesn't, maybe it just doesn't feel as scary anymore. And so people, legitimate questions about how vaccines work and whether is this for me, seeing someone in your neighborhood do that goes a long way to helping you make that decision.
Neil, Patricia?
Yeah, I think both Todd and Patricia have hit on this point pretty thoroughly, but trust is a key part of accepting a fact. And if you hear something from somebody that you trust, you're much more likely to engage with that idea at the very least. And it's hard to fault some communities that have some pretty good historical reasons for being skeptical about what people are saying that they should do. And so being able to grapple with that historical problem, the lack of trust, the proper skepticism, I would say in many ways, of centralized decision-making, kind of showing my political priors there. But grappling with that and finding ways to still spread ideas that are going to be helpful and useful to the people in a community is, it's a challenge. And it's one that takes engaging with people, not as your enemies or as people who are dumb or haven't figured something out, but treating them as humans who have they have their own autonomy and they have their own situation and they have their own community, and they deserve respect for all of those. I think that's really important. That's hard to do at scale. It's something that has to it's a process of person-to-person engagement that builds trust over time. And technologies can help with that, but ultimately it's, as you were pointing out, Larry, technologies can bring people together that had a very difficult time to connect probably before. But it's not a silver bullet on this. At the end of the day, it's treating other people with respect, engaging them with the ideals that you are trying to share with them, and trying to learn from them as well.
So let me I'm going to go back to Mike's question that Patricia started to answer. So what do you do about inauthentic behavior? What do you do about trolls and botnets that pretend? I mean, you can have a 50-year-old Eastern European pretending to be an 18-year-old African-American peer and spreading disinformation. How do we think about that? How do we combat that kind of and they'll amplify the worst instincts, so they'll pick at that sore that they understand there isn't a community. How do we manage with that?
I think there are two ways to do it. I think one is, and when we talk about with our influencers, is there's some trolls that you don't want to fight. Just let it go, pick your battles, and there are things that are worth actually tackling and something they're not. That's one. We don't need to answer to each single comment of mis and disinformation in the environment, because then instead of letting it go, we are actually giving it more weight. That's one thing that we have to be very conscious about. And the other thing, when you have like someone trying to fake that is other person and convince people, then what we have found is combat that with real people that look like them, that can actually connect. So because then this person that is faking that is an African-American or a Hispanic person talking won't be able to show and be on a video. But then if I have someone that is in a video and you can follow my path to, for instance, getting vaccinated. So we have someone, Avina, and she has an immune disease, but she was very concerned about getting vaccinated. And then what we did is we tracked her and then went with her through the entire process, and it's her entire decision process. And then a lot of people follow that, and we were adding more people were starting to follow her to understand because they found interesting. And she had videos like, well, I found this today, and then I don't know what to do. And then she had this trust. And then at the end, like literally was a process of about a month of her finding information and sharing that in social media, and even talking to other people and sharing things that she found, like, oh, this was bad and it was true, and then I don't know what to think. So it was very realistic, you know. And she was also to be able to bring the content down to earth, because you see all these science and doctors, and that's great, but people don't understand them necessarily, and people don't trust them necessarily. But I trust someone like me that actually has the ability to translate that information in something that works for me. So when people heard that, at the end, she got vaccinated, and at least we were able to count 50 people that said, more than 50 people that said, oh, you know what? I'm going to get my vaccine. I went with you through this path. You did it. I understand what you did it. I should do it myself. So that's kind of one of the ways, especially within communities of colors, to be able to do it. Using the trust, the local micro trust that you have in someone that have a similar life experience. But instead of someone telling you, do this, is let me show you why I'm doing this and what is the reason. I won't tell you what to do. I will, because I think people of color are done with people telling them what to do. So show me what, give me the information, and then I will make my decision. And then someone like them doing it and showing you the path and the way, but not telling you what to do about it.
So are we in a completely atomized society now? Are we were talking about this last week when we were having just us folks, and we were talking about I may start a band called Walter Cronkite is Dead. Because when I was a kid, we all at 7 o'clock or 6 wherever you were, you watched Walter Cronkite, and it was a universal belief that there was an objective fact or truth that we were being told, and we all kind of had a mind view that there are facts and then there are things that aren't facts. But there were some universally trusted people, Huntley Brinkley, Peter Jennings, Walter Cronkite. There were some folks that we all looked at and said, okay, they're going to give it to me straight. Are we in a world now where there is no one that we believe is giving it to us straight? Are we just that atomized that if you're a Latino, you have to have a Latina tell you? If you're Native American, you want somebody from your community. If you're a white working class guy, you need to have somebody who reflects that view. If you're a woman, or are there trusted sources that all of us kind of still say, yeah, I know this guy's going to give it to me, or this gal's going to tell me right? Don't everybody jump on that question at once.
Man, that's a hard question, Larry. I don't remember. I don't know that I saw Walter Cronkite on TV, but
he's on YouTube. You'll love him.
after I finish the all the Simpsons seasons, I'll go out. Maybe I think actually, because knowledge is a process, I think we all should be skeptical of having a single source of truth. The world changes, and finding people that you trust and that are credible to you is really important, but it's not, ultimately you still need to be responsible for what you believe and what you choose to believe. And just taking someone's word for something without engaging a little bit of critical thinking, I think it's human nature. We're social creatures, and it would be exhausting to have to cross-examine every factual statement that somebody makes to me. But for important decisions, it's worth that work. And I think it's also worth the work of us as parents and as members of community to help, maybe I'll abstract it a little bit more from what Patricia was saying about a very specific application, but to show people the path towards critical thinking, and not tell them how to do it or how to apply it or what the right answer is, but show them the path to that process and help them engage with the ideas that they see in the world. That is ultimately, I think, a much stronger way, a much more vibrant society than one that relies on, some predictably, truth tellers, a few single people who ultimately are going to let you down, or going to let some people down, but they're not going to be perfect. Just like we aren't.
Never let me down, I must confess. In my entire childhood, Uncle Walter was always there for me at 9 o'clock after we finished eating dinner. I did the dishes to the sound of Walter Cronkite. I'm only kidding, but I am, we're in a world where there are many truth tellers now. I mean, depending upon where you live and who you are, you have your own truth teller, but there's no, but those truths sometimes aren't truths. Go ahead.
But Larry, and going back to TV, the thing is, in the 80s, we had started having cable TV. And we had all those stations for very specific taste and interest that changed the world. And basically, there's no way back. There is no such a thing like a show that will work for everybody or for the large majority of the population ever again. These cable search, if to call it, change our mindsets to the point that now, after many, many years, you only believe in those people that have the same life experiences, the same things, like mothers listens to mothers. African Americans will listen more to an African American. Hispanic will listen more to a Hispanic. A boomer will listen more to and hear and trust more a boomer than if you are a Gen Z and if someone like that is 70 years old comes and tells you what to do, you're going to say, whatever, you don't leave my world. So really, these very micro-segmented, trusted sources of information, which is the challenge we have now, that's what it goes. And that's what we need to learn how to live with that. And that's how the only way to really tackle the mis and disinformation. So regretfully, the answer to your question is there is no way. We have to go into the micro level and learn how to work on those smaller environments to be able to move the entire community. There is not easy, high ROI solution anymore.
So let's move away from the messenger and talk about how the message is conveyed. All of these social platforms have various tools and ways to get information to you. So should we be concerned if mis or disinformation, if it's presented through imagery or videos as opposed to text? And how should we think about that and look at that? Particularly when you're talking about young people, where imagery and videos really may have more impact. As somebody who helped write the Children's TV Act in 1990, I know a little bit about this area. And, how should we think about imagery and videos, particularly as we're talking about mis and disinformation, and particularly as it affects younger audiences?
So I always say that Facebook uses letters, Instagram shows people that a photo is better than that, and then you have TikTok that shows a video. And the reality now is people just watch videos. They don't read anymore. They don't check the news. They don't check the top. As they can read the top headline, and that's as far as they go. So especially with Gen Zs and millennials, particularly Gen Zs, it is about videos. And it's not the video of me talking, because that's too boring. It is a very well elaborated multimedia production that really can be attractive and appealing to them.
Todd, I thought you were going to say something.
Sure. Well, what I can't speak for other platforms, but speaking for Twitter, what I can say is that, the people come to Twitter to participate in conversations that matter to them. We often focus on the news and politics, but there's so much more to it, right? There's sports, there's entertainment, there's everything. But as it pertains to these issues, right? Our users have told us time and again they don't want us to be the arbiter of truth. They would like us to offer them additional context and help them find access to more information so they can make those sort of reasoned, informed judgments that Neil was referring to earlier. And so, one thing that's critical for us to achieve that is making publishing what we call moments, which are like on Twitter, which provide additional context to major news, major moments in the news. We have like trend contextualization on our Explore tab. where we work with organizations like the AP and Reuters to add a little bit of extra info to headlines that people are seeing because of some of those very tendencies that Patricia was referencing, and a handful of topics, including elections, civic processes, and COVID. We also have some labeling of tweets, which should link people to additional authoritative information in the event that someone tweets something that's not exactly accurate, but doesn't necessarily is not so wrong as to warrant removal. Where I'm going with all this is that critical for us is providing additional context, and we do the same thing with synthetic and manipulated media. It's another major area where we target our efforts to combat misinformation, and so that's when to Mike's question in the chat there about manipulated imagery. We have a whole policy, our synthetic and manipulated media policy, and when we encounter a so-called manipulated media, we label it and then we link to an external source that can provide some context and fact checking. We also, going back to another question that Mike asked, we also label things like automated accounts, so folks know if they're encountering a bot, and we label state-backed media operations in many instances. Again, across the board, we're just looking to give people more context and help them make more informed value judgments about the content they choose to interact with.
I want to remind our audience that we're got about 10, 15 minutes long, 9 to 10 minutes left to this panel. So if you have any questions and that you're dying to have answered, this is the chance to opportunity to send them in. But I want to change this a little bit again and move to, not the message, not the messenger, but kind of the area of interest. Should there be categories of things that have more guardrails and tighter regulation of speech because of this sensitivity? Should we care more about how folks message around elections or public health information or emergency communications? Is that something that has a different gravity, a different importance to society? And should we look at it differently? And again, particularly when we're talking about children, well, the elections are talking about children, but public health information and emergency, certainly we are. And elections affect, children as well. So are those areas things we should look at with special sensitivity? Neil, I'm going to start with you because I knew you'd have a perspective as Todd and Patricia are thinking about it.
Yeah, so I would say, just bringing my FTC background to this, in the context of deceptive advertising, for example, at the FTC, you look at something that is material to a consumer's decision making, which means, when you boil it down, that it has a probability of harming them. There are plenty of things that are false. People debate, whether or not so-and-so stepped out of bounds, on some play in the football game yesterday. But those types of things are they're very unlikely to cause the types of harms to consumers or harms to users that some of these other types of manipulation might cause, or misinformation might cause. And so I think it's yes. When you have a limited amount of resources, you should focus on the ones that are going to bring the greatest benefit to your users, and the types of misinformation are going to bring the greatest benefits to your users, and that are part of being a responsible corporate citizen. So yes, there are different things that we should focus on. Now, people can debate about what those categories are. I think part of that is a judgment call by the companies that understand what their resources are and what problems they're likely to make a difference on when they tackle. But yes, without a doubt, you can't focus on everything, or you're not focusing on anything.
Patricia, I see you nodding your head. Agree?
Yes, the answer is yes. But also I will add an extra layer of complexity in this, because it's not only about politics or public health, or it is within those what is specific topics. Because public health, you can talk about hospitals. And you know what? The harm of that is not that good, and think people having misconceptions about it. But when you're talking about vaccines, when you're talking about something that is an epidemiologist problem, then is something that you definitely need to tackle. If we're talking about education in general, then it is not about education. It's about a specific case about it. It is, we had a message there, and it's the finance industry. So there's things about the finance industry that you don't really need to tackle, but there are some that really affects, like, the trademark. So those cases, within the industries, there are specific topics that needs to be highlighted. So it is regretfully even more complex than only just separated by industries.
I'm going to ask one last question. I'm going to ask each of you to give us your minute or so of what you'd like for folks to think about as they're leaving this panel. But let me ask this last question, and then I'll turn it to you for a lightning round of your last thoughts. Jack McCartney sent a question in that companies have surfaced remove bots from the digital ad ecosystem, example, human. Who's working on removing non-human traffic from the news social media, and should we remove it? And Todd, I guess I'll start with you because it's probably more relevant to you, but Neil and Patricia, feel free to chime in if you have a response.
I just want to make sure I understand the question. The question is, what are platforms doing to remove
Who is working on removing non-human traffic from the news social media, and should we remove those such traffic?
I think this is a really interesting question. I think we also have to distinguish between the kinds of automated, there's so many different kinds of automated accounts, right? There are automated accounts that tweet out the weather and traffic. There's an automated account that tweets how
do we focus on the bots and the ones that are engaging in dis and misinformation?
Right. So,
yeah.
To the extent that any account is engaging in inauthentic behavior or manipulating our platform, we have rules to deal with that, and we take action on large numbers of those every day. Whether it's our violations of our platform manipulation and spam rules, or any of our other coordinated harmful activity rules, or the list goes on, we publish a biennial report at the Twitter Transparency Center, so that anyone can take a look at the rules enforcements we've done in the last 6 months. So I just wouldn't want to leave anyone with the impression that, like, all bot equals bad. I think bad bots equal, deserve platform attention and deserve enforcement actions. And so, as it regards to that policy or any of our other policies, you can check out, our own work and at the Twitter Transparency Report. And we'll have our next coming up in the not too distant future.
I think I saw it. I think that the production company for the Walter Cronkite is Dead band is going to be Bad Bot, the Bad Bot Brigade. And you're giving me a lot of fuel for my next career. Let me ask each of you, if you've got 45, 50 people watching us, if there's one thing you want them to leave this panel knowing, thinking, understanding, I'm going to give you each have a minute to provide that to our audience. I want to start with Patricia because she started us off, so she can end us with this last thing. What's the 1 minute summation of what you want folks to leave this panel knowing?
So first of all is to understand that someone that doesn't trust you at this point will not listen to you. So I think the worst thing that we can do is to try to preach people that do not listen, and then we create a bigger issue. So we need to be smart about finding the right trusted source of information. And that happens a lot in politics, like, I have this mindset, and then you fight with half of your friends, and like, you're not going to get that far with that. But then if we really want to do something serious and mis and disinformation, we need to look at the right trusted sources that will be able to deliver that content, and the content that is correct. That's one. And the second one is helping people to translate data and information. A lot of the important information and real thing and real data is pretty complex, and we need to have the ability to, and we need to help people to understand that and being able to take it to their own word and their own realities. And so for those that, obviously they're attending this, have like a more access, they have more access to information and to understand it, is about how do we translate this and communicate that to other people that can be trusted sources of information in the community.
Thanks. Neil?
So I think the big pic, other than pointing out that Bad Robot is J.J. Abrams' production company, that's probably not the fact you should leave this panel with. But I think the key thing I would like people to take away from this is that knowledge is a process. Knowledge building is a process. That means it's never done. And that also means that it's all of us have a role to play in it. I think the points that Patricia made about trust and the importance of that are in the knowledge process are really important. It's not just the individuals that you trust, but it's also what platforms and sources of news that you should trust. But trust is built by continued experience over time with somebody who is reliable. And that means that we have to reach out and try to understand where people are, speak to them with the respect that they deserve as individuals, and provide them with something that's useful to them, but also look to try to learn from them as well. And I think those are the keys to solving the misinformation problem. As I started out, as I said at the beginning, disinformation is a different problem in many ways. There you have bad actors who are deliberately trying to deceive, and that's a whole nother set of issues. It's a challenging one as well. But I think for the misinformation one, there are no simple solutions. And we all just need to get better at that knowledge process and recognize the knowledge process. And that means different things at different levels within society. But the importance there is no, even though the world is more complex, and even though it would be nice if we could hand off this problem to somebody to solve, that's not going to work in the end. We all have a responsibility, and we all need to take that responsibility seriously.
Todd, we're a little bit over time, so bring us home.
I'll talk quickly. I think that our co-panelists put it beautifully. I'll reiterate, addressing misinformation online is going to require a whole of society approach. That's why we work so closely with civil society, academics, public health officials, and on down the line. It's really ultimately our responsibility to create a healthy platform for discourse, but we can't do that alone. And that's why it's so important that we work with groups like FOSI. So thank you to the organizers for having us. Thank you, Larry, for moderating this conversation today. And thank you to the audience for great questions. Look forward to hearing from anyone that wants to connect after this. And I can drop my email address in the chat.
Thank all three of you. Thank FOSI and thank the audience for being here. I mean, this is about you. And I hope we gave parents, educators, and those who might see this at some other date some food for thought. Thank each of you and look forward to you. And I'm Larry Irving, Larry_Irving at Twitter, and Larry Irving at LinkedIn. Best two ways to find me. So thank both of you and all of you, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks a lot, everyone.